Welcome back to Jersey Matters. Right now you are looking at a weather tower at the Meteorology Weather Station at Rutgers University. We're going to talk about Jersey weather with the state climatologist, David Robinson. He's also a professor at Rutgers University. Thank you, sir, for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Welcome.
Let's talk about the winter forecast. Right now, you're going to hear from every local station that they have the winter forecast you have to listen to. Is there any validity with these weather forecasts?
There's not a lot of skill. And the National Weather Service agrees with that for this winter. There's just not strong indicators out there, something we call an El Nino or a La Nina, that sometimes gives us a little edge in the winter forecast. But this year, everything's rather neutral, tending a little bit to La Nina, and that just doesn't give us a signal. Our weather here in the mid-Atlantic states is influenced from the ocean to the east, the land to the west. We're halfway between the tropics and the pole, so we're in a squeeze play, if you will, and can get our weather from all directions, and that makes it exceedingly difficult to predict weeks and months ahead.
So are you saying we should never pay attention to these weather forecasts for the winter, or just this year?
This year in particular is one that's a difficult one. Last year when we had an El Nino event going on, that often leads to coastal storms that can pop a big snowstorm, just what we saw. So there's a little bit more skill in that, but for the most part, this is a difficult region to look at.
So you're saying, based on your expertise, we have no idea what's going to happen this winter?
That's the general idea. My feeling right now is because there's no leading indicator out there, we're probably going to have a variable winter with the weather coming at us from multiple directions. Maybe a few coastal storms, a few storms go up through the Great Lakes. You know, that occasional cold front come in that's rather quickly replaced by some warm air. So I think we're going to have a potpourri of weather this winter rather than anything leaning in one particular direction.
Let's talk about Superstorm Sandy for a second, because that's still on top of everyone's minds. Some people are still not into their homes and have not recovered from this. Was that a perfect storm that can't happen again or won't happen in hundreds of years, or are we more susceptible to those storms now?
Yeah, it was a hybrid storm, so it was a rare bird, but it's not a worst case scenario for New Jersey and the mid-Atlantic. It didn't even have hurricane force sustained winds anywhere along the coast. So it could be worse, but given the combination of the exceedingly high tides that came in and the storm surge associated with that, and the very strong winds that made their way inland, it was unusual, but it certainly could happen again, and it could be exacerbated in the future because sea level is rising, and every inch you add to sea level makes the flooding worse when you have a storm surge. And the oceans and atmosphere are getting warmer, so everything's primed for this kind of storm to come more frequently in the future.
Have we been lucky with these hurricanes? They always seem to skirt past New Jersey.
Climatologically, we're in a pretty safe zone given the geometry of the coastline. We are in a pretty protected zone for direct landfalls.
Wonderful. One last question. The people along the coastline are worried about their houses. We keep hearing about beach erosion. You hear about climate change. Are they safe for the time being?
Well, for the time being, there's efforts to raise houses and make them more resilient to future flooding, as well as utilities and roadways as well. But ultimately, I might add, there's beach replenishment going on and things like that.
Sure.
So that's a stopgap measure, a Band-Aid at this point. But sea level is rising. We anticipate sea level perhaps being a foot higher by the middle of this century and 2 or 3 feet higher by the end of this century. And with each inch that sea level rises, it makes the coastal areas more vulnerable.
So don't sell your house right now, but in the next 30, 40 years, you might want to think about it?
One should look down the road, and if you're in an area that's susceptible to pretty frequent flooding, you're the ones that are going to be called first to head out.
Sir, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. State climatologist David Robinson, who also is a professor here at Rutgers University. That wraps up Jersey Matters for this week. Stick around now for another thing.